So this lecture is just going to be like a quick. I'm going to do it's like a lemo where you have like a lecture and demo kind of folded into one. So I'm going to talk about the validations using a custom manager. And then I'm also going to talk about using bcrypt to store passwords and doing like a quick login and reg. Okay. So why do we need to have this separate manager? And what is the purpose of it, right? Well, basically, when you do, model name dot objects dot filter or whatever, that objects inside of the class, it's of the manager class, right? So it's the thing that manages the objects in the database. So what you can do is if you create a new class that inherits from the manager, then you can essentially do what's known as like overloading, which is kind of like adding additional functionality to existing functions by defining these additional functions in here, right? So why the heck do we do this? Well, you guys, this is like your first foray into MVC architecture, right? And in MVC, there's this sort of idea that models don't touch the request objects. The request objects are always touched by what? The controller, the one that does the logic. And here it's views.py, right? So that's why we kind of have these different sort of validations in place inside of the manager in the model, but we don't actually add to the flash messages immediately inside the model, because in the messages API for adding flash messages in Django, you need to pass the request in, right? Messages dot error, request error, extra tag equals tag. So you don't want the model to do that, but rather what you do is you use your custom manager method. In this case, it's called basic validator, and you run it, and then you look at the returned result. If there are errors within the returned result, then inside of views.py is where you add to the messages. Okay, so that's kind of like the gist of what we're trying to do here. All right, so let's just get started. So let's cd into desktop. Oh, I'm already in there. So if I go source Django env bin activate. Awesome. Now it's cd into Python 7/2017 cohort, Django, and then let's say Django admin start project. Let's just call this login reg lecture or lemo. Nice. All right. So cd into login reg lemo. Now let's make the apps directory. Now let's cd into apps, touch dunder init.py. Then I'll say python / manage.py, start app, and let's call this login reg app. Okay. Then let's cd into login reg app. Let's touch urls.py. cd out, sublime, and now we can look inside, right? So we just need to add this to the settings. So I'll say apps.loginreg app. Awesome. And then inside of here in the URLs, let's just kind of have that set up already. So here we also need to import include. I'll say URL, and then the regex that starts with anything, I'm just going to say include apps.loginreg app.urls, right? Cool. Now inside of loginreg apps URLs, I'm just going to copy some of this over. And then here on the URL, which is described by the slash route, which is caret $, right? I'm going to say views.index, and then I'm going to say from dot import views. Cool. And then let's also import from, actually no, we don't import that here. All right, awesome. So let's create our model. So we're just going to make a really quick model. We'll just call it user. So it's models.model, right? And then I'll just say name equals models.carField, max length equals 255. And then let's just say email equals models.carField. And then let's also say password equals models.carField. Okay? Cool. Any questions about this so far? It seems pretty basic, right? All right. So let's go create our view function. So I'll say def index request. And I'm just going to say return a render of what's it called? Templates login reg app slash index.html. So let's create those directories. Cd into apps, login reg app, make directory templates, make directory templates slash login reg. Reg app. Okay. All right. So here, let's go inside of this directory and create our index.html. And let's just say login or register. Okay. And then let's put right here, register new. Okay. And let's just kind of leave it at that. And let's do Python manage.py run server. All right. Let's migrate first too. So make migrations and migrate. Awesome. Localhost 8000. Oops. What did I mess up? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is just inside of here, we're just going to have some inputs inside of p tags, and then right here, I'm just going to say name, input type equals text, name equals name, email, and then let's have password, and then make this a password field, and then let's just call this password confirmation, and let's call this password conf. And then let's just have an input type submit. Okay, and then right here, let's just have the action be to, what would be the RESTful way? What would be the action that I'm going to do it if I'm going to make it RESTful? If I'm making a user, what is the RESTful route for creating a user? Slash? Just slash? Slash users, right? So the whole point of REST is to say, by looking at the method and the action, you can kind of, like the type of request you're sending, you kind of have this idea of what you're doing beforehand. So if you're posting to users, that's kind of the RESTful way of saying, I want to create a user, okay? All right, so inside of here, let's say URL. Then I say users, $, views.register. Cool. Now if I say def register request, now let's just return a redirect to slash, which means we also need to import redirect. Okay? Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just doing basic validations, and then afterwards we'll kind of talk about how to implement login and reg, right? So I'm not going to really touch the user model yet. I'm just going to kind of just make these basic validations. Okay, so what do you want them to be? We probably want some regex to make sure that it matches the email format. What about the name? Maybe like a minimum length, right? And then the password and the password confirmation field need to match, right? So let's just list that out. So email must be a format, and then name must have length of at least 8. 8's too much. 4. Okay, and then password and password conf need to match. Okay. Realize I'm writing this in the wrong file. We probably need to write that inside of models file. Okay. So those are our basic validations. Okay. So for those of you who have done validations before, how do I create a custom manager?
You have a new class.
Okay.
The same name though, right?
Not the same name. You can name it whatever you like.
So manage our model.
But it's models.manager, correct? Right. All right. Then what do? We write our validation method, right? Right. So we have to first create the method, though, right? So I say def. Let's just call this validate reg. Okay. We just pass in self into this function, right? And then we also need one more parameter, and we're going to call this the post underscore data. So this is what we're going to be passed from our views when we run this function, right? So we can think of, if I was to kind of show you the full picture, right here what I would do is I would say user.objects dot, what's it called? Validate reg on request.post, right? And then I'll just say that's equal to some variable called, I like to call it the user. Okay. So when we're passing this parameter in, we can assume that post data is going to be what? What kind of data is post data? What kind of data structure is it? Data type. Dictionary, right? So now we can look at post data like it's a dictionary, correct? So what are the names of our fields? Well, they're pretty obviously named, so we can just start writing our conditions, right? So yeah, Myron, you mentioned creating an errors dictionary, right? So I could say errors equals empty dictionary, right? Then I could say something like if what? If the length of the post data is less than 4, then I could say something like errors at key name equals name must be at least 4 characters long. So let's just try to implement this name one, okay? So I could say something like if, let me just double check something really quick. So are empty dictionaries falsy in Python? Does anybody know? So let's just do print, let's see, if blank dictionary, print blank. Okay. No, they are falsy.
Oh, okay.
Right. Empty dictionary Python falsy. And I believe it is. Yeah. Check truthiness. Yeah. Awesome. So empty dictionaries will give false values, right? So if there are errors, right, then I'm going to return errors, right? else what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write some pseudocode. I'm just going to pass, but what we're going to try to do here is actually register the user. Okay? Does that part make sense? Like the big picture here that we're trying to accomplish? Any questions about that? Yeah.
So when you put error's name, it automatically knows that it just puts in name as the first key?
Yeah, it just creates a key called name inside of that errors dictionary.
Above that, don't you need to do it len post data bracket?
Oh, yes we do. Post data name, right? Thank you.
And it doesn't need to be colon after errors bracket, or is it for equal sign?
It's equal sign.
Okay.
If you're writing the dictionary out literally, like in here,
Yeah.
then you need colon.
Okay.
Okay? Cool. All right. So, right here, what we could do is we could also print errors. Okay? So if I refresh this page, I put in a bad request. Oh, whoops. What am I missing here?
Yeah.
Key.
csurf, right? So since I modified the HTML, I'm going to have to send it back. Global name user is not defined, right? So I have to say from.models import user. And what else do we need to do? We're missing one step. We created this manager class, but how are we relating it to the user class? Do you guys remember? So you're creating a user manager object and replacing the object's property with that custom manager, right? This is where the quote-unquote overloading happens, right? Awesome. So we got sent back. Now, does it show us anything? Awesome. Name must be at least 4 characters long. That's good. Cool. So let's just kind of grab this code, but let's just do this thing right here. Okay. All right. So in our views.py, right, we could say if we could even say if the user, let's see. Oh, this one is, definitely. If the user, So for login and registration, you kind of have to do it a little differently than you do other validations. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a nested, I'm going to kind of scrap the data structure that was given here. Sorry about that. So let's just call it a user equals blank. And I could say a user errors and then name. So there's like this nested dictionary, right? So we could say even a user at key errors equals blank dictionary, okay? The reason why I'm doing this is because if we do pass validations and we create a user, we're going to return a user object and not an errors object, right? Does everybody kind of understand what's going on there?
Yeah.
Cool. So what I can do then here is if the user at key errors is not falsy, right, which means that there are users inside, then I could say, I could iterate through them again, but it would be nested in the user object. And then I'm just going to add to the messages, right? And then I'm just going to say return a redirect to slash. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. So for tag error in, I think when they do it in the platform, they also add a tag to it. No, I don't think so. Interesting. Okay, let's see if this works, right? So how do we display our errors in our template? I mean, we already have a for loop, right? But I'm saying in my template. So before we do anything, we also need to say from Django.contrib import what? Messages, right? We need to import the messages module. Okay? So in our index.html, how are we going to iterate through those things?
You have to have a for loop starting with a for. I don't remember what the exact syntax was, but I think it's a message.
Anybody know? Like this?
Still message.
But then the messages API, right? Let's look at the documentation together. So Django messages module. So we're gonna say adding messages, right? We pass messages in, but we say, there we go. If messages, for message, in messages. Awesome. In fact, you know what? Let's just copy this, right? Nothing wrong with what we're doing here. It's not cheating, certainly not. All right. What are we getting wrong? Expected an indented block. So I'm guessing that when I copied it from in views.py, let's see, line 12 is the error. If the user errors for tag error,
I think the return. You would return that.
oh, this thing?
The
No.
one above it, because you don't want to return inside of your. Oh no, sorry, never mind.
I think you do.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, it was just like a formatting thing. No worries. All right, it says global name errors is not defined. So where is that? It says user.objects.validateReg if errors. So I forgot to change what? Where is this going wrong? Models.py, right? And it's because a user at key errors. Exactly. And then we also should probably print those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Just paste those in. Okay. Can we submit the form? It says key error errors. If a user errors, if the user has errors, oh, that's in the outer part. So what's going on here? Well, what did I forget to do? I needed to return a user, right? Because I'm looking for this key in there. But if I return that key from the inner function, then I'm just going to get the nested dictionary, but I want the whole thing. So I need to return a user altogether. Cool. We have validations. All right. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Can you explain going back to the tags and error in the for loop?
Yeah.
Just tag and error, like comma error.
In here,
Yeah, the stuff that you copied.
right here, the tags.
No, not that. Well, kind of that, but then also going back to
Right here.
views. Yeah. What is tag comma error in user?
So if you wanted to actually create more items in the user errors, right? And then you had it maybe be like another sort of, what's it called? Like when you do a for loop using this, right? Then you could say the error users at name, right? That's what we did. So that name key, right? When you say for blank comma blank, the first thing is the key, the second thing is just the value,
okay.
right? So then now what was the key we saved it under in models? It was called name, right? So if I wanted like special syntax right here for the class, right? Message.tags. So if we look here, what I'm saying is if we inspect element, we'll see name error, right? Because that was the tag that was passed along.
Ah, okay.
Make sense?
Is there, yeah. Then another question, if you do another comma and add another like kind of variable to your thing, what would it say then? So like in your for loop, for in your views, right? If you had besides tags, errors, maybe you had another. Like,
I don't think it'll work like that.
Okay.
The for loop for in loops, I think you can only have up to 2 loop variables.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Does it explain tagging on the platform?
Huh?
Does it explain how to use tag?
It's just going to be something you want to look up on your own.
Okay.
All right. So in the head, let's just add, I don't know, some really messy styling where I just say class error is color red. All right. And if I enter in something bad, nice. All right. So that's our basic validation. Okay. Cool. So let's do email now. So email is going to be fairly similar, but all we're going to do is inside of our models.py, let's also import what? Let's import regex, re, right? And then let's say the variable email regex equals re.compile, right? And then we could even grab like the code from our Flask stuff. So let me do that real quick. Just to show you guys that it's okay to be, you know, copying and pasting wisely, I suppose, from certain things, right? So let's go into server.py. Totally not cheating. So right here, right, we can just copy this. Okay? So we could say, inside of here, this is where we're doing our validation logic. If if not re.match post data at field email with email regex, might be the other way around actually. Right? If that's not the case, then we can just say we're going to create a new key in the errors dictionary under the key email, and we must say email must be of correct format. Okay? Does that make sense? Cool. So now, if I, mess this up really badly, now we have 2 validation errors. Nice? Nice. Okay. So then all we're going to do is let's modify this one, add another one that's kind of a copy of it. But what we're going to do is we're going to check the length of the password. Password should be around at least 8 characters. So if I say password is less than 8, then password must be at least 8 characters long. And then we could do one last thing. We could check the password and password confirmation need to match, right? So how do we write that?
Post data password.
Okay.
Oops.
Okay.
Equals. Oh yeah, sorry, that's not equal.
Post password.
Yeah, that's the name of the field. Right? If that's the case, then a user at errors, we can make it password, and then we could say password must match password confirmation field. Okay? That's a nice addition. I wonder if I'll hear that in the lecture, in the video. Okay. So now we can just do something here where I just don't match them. And now we have all of our basic, validations going on. Okay? So any questions about that?
Can you go back to your models?
Yeah.
I have scroll down to your user model.
Mhm.
Objects equals user manager.
Mhm.
Like, I know that what is that for? Like what does it do exactly?
You need to replace the default manager that's provided by Django with your custom manager.
Okay.
Because they both inherit from the models.manager, you can do that, right? It's like a thing about object-oriented programming, is that if you have objects of similar types, you can add new methods to them, and then for the most part, they should still play nicely with the rest of the framework.
So does that variable objects need to be named objects all the time?
It has to be named objects. Why is that? Because you say user.objects.create or login or whatever,
So it
right?
has to be that particular variable.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, you could make it another variable name. I mean, another property name. But then again, then you're going to have to use that special property name every time,
Okay,
right?
I understand. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, what's up?
What if I want to make successful validation messages? They were successful with their login and I want to flash like login successful or registration successful.
Then I'll get back to that once we actually have successful registration. I'll try to add some validations for success, okay? Cool. Any questions
So we're gonna register the user inside
of this else?
username. So that's not what the platform does.
What does it do?
They register it in the views.
You're right. So let's get that out. Sorry about that. You're always going to return a user. And yes, you create it, you handle that logic inside of the register function, right? So it would actually belong to the else here. I got my files mixed up. Does that make sense?
So is that the reason why you created for when you do user.objects.validate, you wanted to create a user instead of just the errors? Because now your validate underscore reg only returns errors, right?
If there are errors, but I still kind of want to, I see what you're saying. Maybe the variable wasn't quite named as nicely now that I look back at it. But the thing is, I still want to use, do I have any use for any of that? I guess not. We could go back and rename everything. Do you guys want to do that?
Well, I guess my question is the validator thing is only returning errors, right?
Right.
So,
But the thing
I
is,
guess it's the naming thing.
like, they don't ever show you how to do login and registration in the platform, right? And the way that I do it is that you don't create in here, you create in the models and return the user that's created, so that you just kind of send it the post data and you either get errors or the user you created, right? Because in the validations here, it's not like you're creating anything, are you, here? Oh, you do create it right here, right? So let's just follow along with that, all right? Because it's a little different than the way I usually do it, but let's just do it with the way that the platform does it, okay? That cool? All right. Then what I'm going to do is let's just do some quick copy and pasting here. There, we're good, okay? And then we'll go into here, and then let's just grab this, errors, and if errors, and we're back to where we were, okay? So let's just make sure we didn't break anything. Oh, we broke something. Expected an unindented block. Oh, because inside of the views.py else we want to pass. Okay. Request error for tag error in errors. If errors. Print errors, return.
Oh,
You're
return
not returning,
errors.
you're not returning errors.
There we go. Thank you. All right, we're back to where we were. Thanks for clarifying that for me. I was a little mixed up with that. Cool. So let's go into here. And now let's register the user. Okay? So what do we need to do here? Well, in here, we likely want to import bcrypt, right? So let's just kind of get out of the server real quick, run pip list, make sure bcrypt is installed. Bcrypt is installed, so we are all good. So in this bcrypt section in the platform, they kind of talk about how to use the bcrypt method. The only thing I'm going to say is here you're going to use their built-in methods, but remember, like when we did MD5, the MD5 object is not like a string that we can look through, and in the same way, the bcrypt methods, they can't be passed Unicode strings, which don't really have an encoding baked into them. We need to encode them ourselves. So we're going to encode them with like ASCII, and then we can use that in the bcrypt hash password function. Okay? Cool. So what are the steps we need to register? What's like the first step?
Inserting into the database.
That's the last step, right? Or second to last step. What's like the thing that we want to make sure we don't have duplicates of in our database for users?
Email.
Email, right? So let's look for users with that email, right? So I'll say found users equals what? User.objects dot filter, and what are we going to filter on? And then what's it going to look equal to? Right? Awesome. So I could say something like if found users dot count, if the count of the found users inside of this query set is greater than 0, what does that mean? We can't register, right? So let's actually add another messages dot error request, and then we can just write the error in here. Email already taken, right? Awesome. And then we could say, I don't know, extra tags equals email, right? All right. Any questions about that?
Is messages.error, the dot error, that's a method inside of messages, right?
Yeah, and that's for specifically error messages. So when you say messages.error, it adds the tag called error automatically for you. Okay? Cool. So now what do we do? If that's not the case, then we can actually start adding them to the database, right? Think back to Flask. What did we have to do when we add someone to the database, password and all? Hash the password, right? So I could say something like hashed password equals bcrypt.hash hash pw, right? And then now I could say, what is the first parameter? Well, it's the request.post password, right? And then we want to encode it. Then we could run the bcrypt.gensalt function to generate our salt for us. Okay? Cool. Can we create the user now? I think so, right? Okay. So what we could say is name equals request.post name. Email equals what? Request.post email. How about the password? Exactly. That's where it changes, right? And then what we could do here is we could just manipulate the session right here. So I could say request.session. So what is the information we want in the session usually? Just like an ID, right? So I could say the user ID is equal to let's actually assign this to something. Created user equals that thing, right? And then we could say that's equal to the created user dot ID. And then we could say request dot session username equals created user their name property. Now let's return a redirect to let's just call it success. Okay. Any questions about that? Let's also print the created user. Okay. So let's just add that route real quick for success.
Will you print created user values?
Yeah, it's just gonna print out the overall object. Actually, it'll be a single user. You don't need to go through in
So
values.
it's not a hash table. Or sorry, not a hash table.
It's not a query set.
Yeah, not a query set. Sorry.
Okay. And then let's just create our success.html. There's like a piece of dust right where the dot is. Okay, it's okay, cool. I was like, is that a comma or is that just dust? So success. And then I could just say, print out request.session.username. Okay? Cool. Any questions about any of this stuff? So let's see if this works. And it doesn't. Module object has no, oh, oops, I missed a step. I forgot to say def success request return render on the request object and login reg app slash success.html. All right, cool. So let's like legitimately try to register someone. So I'll call myself Kevin at test.com, password. Okay, module object has no attribute hash password. Oh, just hash PW. Thank you. Right here. So we can refresh this. Welcome, Kevin. I'm logged in now. Right? Any questions about that? All right. So let's just do one last thing. Let's register. Let's log in. Okay. So inside of here, let's just create another form. You're making me nervous, Eli. Action equals, let's just call this slash login. Method equals post. And then we could say something like, you know, we just basically need the email and the password fields. So we can just copy these lines. And then I could say input type submit. Okay. Then in our URLs, we can just say URL for the regex with login inside, use.login. All right, guys. So what is the logic for what we want to do when we log in?
We're going to check it.
Check what?
With like all your user objects.
For that email, right? For the one with that email. Okay. Anything else?
Also the password.
Then check password, right? So let's do that. So all I could say is we could just copy this logic where we, you know, find a user based on email. And then we could also say right here, if found users count is greater than 0, then we actually found someone and now we can check the passwords, right?
Should we use a get
Yeah.
instead? Or
If you do a get, and that email is not in the database, you'll get thrown an error, which means that you'd have to resort to using try except blocks,
Okay.
which is something that you guys I feel like from the vibe I get with you guys regarding try except, it's something that is kind of unfamiliar to you. You don't really like using it. Something that I kind of wanted to accommodate, so that's why I said filter and not get. Okay?
Okay.
Cool.
So if we're comfortable, try accept apply it again.
You would say try found users user.objects.get,
Yeah.
and then you would write all your logic in there. In the except, you would just throw error messages.
Yeah.
Okay? Cool. So,
You don't have to provide the error for the accept. Like, accept key error or something.
it's not a key error.
Right.
You'd have to look at what the error is, but it's specific to Django.
But
So-
you do have to provide that error.
You don't. You can just provide a blanket accept,
Okay.
right? All right. So, what I'm gonna do is users.first. I just want the first one, right? I just want the individual user object. Then what I could do is I could say bcrypt.checkpw, that function, and then I'm gonna pass in what?
Password or request.post password.
And then I'm gonna grab what? The encrypted string, right? And then that means that I need to encode this Unicode string into ASCII, and then also get the found user at key password. I might have to encode that as well. Let's try it without it, but yeah, let's do that. So if, oh, sorry. If that is equal to true, then what? Exactly.
I think you're missing a parenthesis.
Where?
Yeah. Like what is that last parenthesis of?
It closes check password.
Oh, okay.
All right. And all we need to do is change references from created user to what? The found user. All right. And then we could say here, else, we'll just create our own custom error message that says, like login failed, and return a redirect to /. Right? And then we could also have that same logic, this other else, for what? The found user stuff, right? If we don't find anybody with that email, then we shouldn't be able to go any further, right? Cool. Oh, let me just kind of think of one thing that I'm missing here. So if I do cool.cool.com, I should get an error message, login failed. Awesome. User object has no attribute, get item. That is inside of likely found user.id, found user.name, found users.first.
Is it because your name is, sorry, your found users is your, like, you have to do at 0 position for found user?
Yeah, we might have to do that. No, first should work.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see first. Oh, you
Is it because, let's look at what the error message is on.
The one in the database. It's just a string now.
This one?
The one out there.
This one. I need to encode this, right? Exactly. Nope. Doesn't. It still seems to be not liking this. If that, let's look at the check password. Yeah, it's the request post at key password dot encode. And then the found user's password. Oh, oops. I found it. Let's try it without the encoding then. I knew it had to do something with the found user password, but. All right. It does need to be encoded. Nice. So if you don't encode it, it says Unicode objects must be encoded before checking. And that's a bcrypt error. Okay. And there we go. Same spot. Right? So bcrypt encrypted strings contain the salt. The first 4 characters are like the version of bcrypt. The next 16 are like the salt. And then the last 40 are the encrypted string. And it's 60 characters total. So yeah, you don't need the salt. It extracts it from the hash password. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. So I know this was a little long. I apologize for that. But do you guys get the sort of general idea, right? Of using these custom managers. All you're going to do is just create validations here. You're not going to really do any sort of creation logic. You save that for the views, right?
So models, all you're passing is errors, right?
All you're passing back is errors. Yeah. Yes.
So, could you, in this case, because there's like some inconsistency, like you're using a validation for that, right? Could you use a validation, or not a validation, but a login function for your user's manager for like your login logic as well?
Yeah, but I mean, if we wanted to completely separate the queries into views.py, that validation, what would it do? Just check the regex to make sure it matched the regex, right?
No, I meant like passive. Like, so you know how you you validated it through your models, models.py. Could you technically do the same thing with like a login kind of check as well?
Right, but I'm just saying, what would that login check? What would that consist of? You can't query the database from inside of here.
Okay.
That belongs to the views, right?
Okay.
So the only thing you'd be really checking is the regex, but that's kind of unnecessary, right? If it doesn't match the regex, it's not going to match any email in your database.
Okay.
So I'd rather just keep it like this. Don't make your models too fat.
Okay.
Views being fat, I guess you just kind of got to live with it, because that's where all your logic is. All right? Just a word of warning, don't try to send entire user objects into session. It's not going to work well. I've had trouble with that. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you, guys.